Hey team, welcome to episode 25 of the Golf Never Sleeps podcast. So I'm recording this in late December. Holiday season is very close, a week before Christmas. And what I've decided to do today is I've had a little bit of time to reflect on some of the things that I've learned this year, or maybe some of the things that I've been reminded of this year, maybe is a better way to put it. And I want to break down some of the top things I've learned in 2024. This is part coaching, this is part personal, but I have 6 things, and there's also something I learned about a major champion this year as well that I want to share. So top things I've learned in 2024, sorry. The top things I've learned in 2023. So they're not in any particular order. I'm just going to go through them. The number one thing that I learned or that I was reminded of this year is never assume that anyone knows anything or that they interpret something the way that you meant to interpret it. And this has a lot to do with coaching. And there was a couple times this year that there was players that I had worked with for several years. And they're longtime students of mine. We spent a ton of time together. And sometimes I would ask them some questions where I assumed, they must know this, or for sure I've said this before, or they definitely understand what I'm saying when I say this. And sometimes their answers kind of made me take a step back like, whoa, I've been operating under the assumption that this person understands what I mean when I say that, and it actually doesn't compute in their mind the way that I thought it would. And at times that set us back in our progress. There was also different times this year where I'd be on the golf course with a student and we'd be talking about a golf shot or a number or different things like that, and something that we were communicating. I was thinking about it one way, or I was looking at one specific target and they were looking at a different target. Or even with some of my juniors and talking about some of the expectations that we have set or the way that we're going to prepare, or especially communicating back and forth with parents. There were some times this year where I thought we were on the same page, and then you'd come to find out that you aren't on the same page. So I think whether you're a coach listening or whether you are a golfer listening, whether a parent or whatever it is, I don't think we can ever communicate enough, or I don't think that we can ever make sure enough that everyone's on the same page. And maybe more specifically for me, something that I learned that I have to continue to do, or to try to do a better job of, is communicating to my players to make sure that they understand exactly what I'm asking them to do and exactly what the expectation is. And with that, also putting it back on them to make sure that they understand exactly what I'm asking them to do, but also giving them a chance and understanding that they might not get it right away, but giving them a chance to provide some feedback on what they're thinking or feeling. So the number one thing is just that reminder for me. I never want to assume that anyone always understands what I'm saying, and maybe for me to be at the forefront that I need to make sure that my message is clear and concise, and also give them a chance to provide some feedback on it. So that was number one. Never assume someone understands what you're saying. Second thing I learned this year, and this was maybe more towards the later part of this year, is there's so much to learn exploring other sports. And this is maybe not even so much more of the technique, but more of the coaching aspect. And towards the end of the year, I was introduced to 2 different people. One who's actually been a guest on this podcast, Tyler Ray at Jump Guy Ty on Instagram. He is a coach around helping players jump as high as they can. He is one of the leading coaches in the world on vertical jumps. He works with a lot of basketball players, volleyball players, and a wide range of different athletes to help them jump as high as they can. And the time that we have spent together has really opened up my eyes to that world. And although he's teaching one specific technique, which is jumping, there's so many things that run in parallel when it comes to one, just developing athletes, but also golf specifically, where we're talking about when we want players to hit the golf ball farther, a lot of them have a huge opportunity by using the ground more efficiently and generating more force. The fancy term we call it is ground reaction force. And spending a little bit of time with Tyler and consuming more and more of his content, there's so much that I can learn from Tyler and from his world of coaching other sports, and specifically a technique in other sports, to help players achieve their highest jump, which I think can help me in helping players produce more force to help them hit the golf ball as far as they can. The other example that I have is the PGA of Canada hosted their national coaching conference in Ottawa in the early part of December. And one of the breakout sessions was a basketball coach. One of our national women's basketball coaches for juniors did a 1-hour presentation essentially on her system and how she brings her team together. And this resonated a lot with me because I believe her team has a lot of juniors, let's say under the age of 18 years old. And I work with a lot of junior golfers and aspiring collegiate players as well. And she did some fantastic breakdowns of the systems that she has in place. And one of the takeaways that I have is that she did a fantastic job trying to really understand where her players come from. And what I mean by that is she was asking them questions in group settings sometimes, but also in one-on-one sessions, just trying to understand how do you behave at home? What are your rules at home? What are the different things that go on in your home environment that I need to know about? And I didn't take it as she was prying for personal information, but she was trying to say, if I want to make a connection with this player, I need to understand kind of how they grew up or how they are growing up and what they're coming from. And she told some fantastic stories about the way that some of her players behave at home and act at home and some of the rules that they have at home were giving her ideas on, I need to pivot on the way that I look at trying to communicate with these players, because there's a huge disconnect between what I'm trying to provide them and the way that they're used to getting information from adults at home. And there was a huge opportunity there for her to say, I could actually change the way I do a few things while getting to know this player a little bit better. So we build a one-on-one connection, but I'm also starting to understand this is how this player actually likes to be communicated to or have practices broken down, or this is how they look at discipline or different things like that. And just her system about how a player came in, and very early on, she's getting to know them, their expectations about what they want to know, where they come from, their family's background, how they like to learn, and different things like that. And then she did a fantastic job. Well, first off, fantastic job sharing. But she broke down the Excel file that she essentially creates for every player, their profile, and all the information that she puts in there. She has several team members in terms of physio and teachers and different things like that. And all that information is shared amongst the coaches and is all very accessible. And something that I took away is, yes, that I have a couple members on my team where I have sports psychologists and I have a medical team for some of my players. And we do have some communication there, but I was reminded that I could do so much more in keeping that communication open. And I took a lot away from this coach and the way that they are developing high-level basketball players and helping me develop high-level golfers. So number 2 is exploring other sports, and specifically the sport of jumping and the sport of basketball really taught me a lot this year. Pivoting a little bit, number 3, and this is maybe part coaching, but this is maybe kind of more part life. Trying new things is rarely a bad idea. And this year for me, a couple key things that I've tried to do more of is I've spent way more time sharing content on social media. I've launched a podcast, which is this one. I've launched a weekly newsletter called the Thursday Tea Time. And all 3 of those new ventures for me have been beneficial in one way or another. All 3 of them have taught me maybe a lot. Actually, they've taught me a lot about myself, because adding these things to a pretty busy plate has forced me to be a lot more precise on when I'm planning to do these things, because my podcast always comes out on Tuesdays, my newsletter always goes out on Thursdays, and I post to social essentially every day. So I've had to become a lot more structured in planning how I use my time to make sure that I can add all these things in without taking away from the time that I spend with my friends, my family, and my wife. Because I told myself that these things I will add, but if it gets to a point where I'm adding too much, where it's taking away from some of those key things, then it's something I'm going to have to pull back on. Hey, I hope you're enjoying this podcast episode. If you are, I have a favor to ask. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe to this channel, like this video, and make sure you hit that bell to make sure you get notified on when a new episode drops. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts, please make sure you subscribe there as well. But if you could leave me a rating, wherever you're listening or watching, if you do those things for me, it really helps the podcast grow and also motivates me to put out more content. And as always, on any platform, if you ever have any questions, please reach out, let me know. I answered every comment. Now let's get you back to your episode. But the reason why I've launched these, and it's funny, recently talking to a few people, they've made the comment, you do so much, I can't believe you're able to do so much. As I've gone along, and maybe it's only been about a year or two or so where I've consumed a lot of content, but eventually I got to the point where I thought a lot of these things were good ideas. And right now I'm kind of operating under the assumption that I would rather try something and know if it works or not than not try it and wonder if it would have ever worked out. And I feel in a lot of regards, this year I've put myself out there. I post a lot of content around the way that I coach and me working with my students. I spend time every single week, this is now episode 25, sharing some of my thoughts and working on how I communicate, but then also trying to transfer that into the written word as well as I spend more time developing a newsletter. I've really enjoyed the fact that I think a lot of us always operate under I'm afraid to try something because I'm afraid of what might happen if it goes wrong. I don't want to look silly. I don't want to be embarrassed. I honestly think that some people are afraid to go all in because if they go all in and fail, they have nothing to fall back on. Like I believe a lot of people have that. And I honestly believe that there's some golfers out there that they won't put everything that they have into it because they're more afraid of failing than anything. And what I've enjoyed is that as I've continued to do this, it's pushed me to continue to put myself out there. And yes, there's some people that have said negative things. There's obviously haters all over the world, but those people aren't going anywhere. At least there's always going to be people around that have negative things to say. But the thing that I've enjoyed is I have learned so much about myself, the way that I coach, the way that I communicate, because I challenge myself to put more out there. And I believe I've learned and developed more as a coach this year over any other year, because in the back of my mind, I've always told myself, or I'm telling myself now that I'm going to share this, I'm going to share this, I'm going to share this. I'm going to share my thoughts. I'm going to share the drills that I use. I'm going to share my golf swing online. And being able to put aside that, yes, there's always going to be people that have negative things to say, but I have so much more to gain by putting myself out there than I do worrying about what the 1% of idiots out there are going to say. So for all of you, regardless what you do, whether you're a golfer trying to get to the next level or you're a coach trying to develop, what I've learned this year is very rarely is trying anything a bad idea. Especially if it's an idea that you have in your mind. You're like, you know what, I wish I would do this, or I wish I would attend this. Go do that. I talk about that conference that I went to in Ottawa, and it's funny. I attend a lot of conferences. I attend a lot of education. I thoroughly enjoy attending those things. And I know that there's a lot of people that say that they wish that they could. But sometimes the money or the time or different commitments like that. And I came back from that trip to Ottawa, and within a couple of days, I knew that the connections that I made and the notes that I took to optimize my programs or different offerings that I could have trumped the cost and the time of going. I took so much more away from attending than I would have sitting at home saving that money, because I probably wouldn't have executed on a lot of things. So it's a pretty long-winded answer for number 3, but trying new things is rarely a bad idea. And I want you to keep in mind what I believe and what I took away from this year. It's a lot better to try something and know if it works than not try and wonder. If no one listened to this podcast, I would know people don't like hearing me talk, right? It would be pretty clear. If I posted content on social media and I got no reaction, I got no followers, I got no reach, and it would be clear. But I didn't know that actually people do enjoy listening to my podcast, I think, because I'm happy with the number of downloads that I get. People do enjoy the content that I post online because I'm gaining followers and traction. I would have never known that before. So that's my number 3. All right. Number 4, we're going to pivot totally different direction. This is more specifically for coaching. You have to play golf with your students. You have to. You have to see them compete. And I believe I've said this on this podcast before, but it's crazy for golf instructors or even for golf instructors, period, we see our players compete such a very small amount, or we see players on their field of play, which is the golf course, such a small percentage of the time. And that's so unique in a negative way than so many other sports, right? Your hockey coach is at every practice, but they're also at every game. They get to see you compete. As golf coaches, most of the time when we're buried on the driving range, we don't actually watch our players play this game. And I can say with 100% confidence that watching my players play on the golf course has drastically changed the way that I coach and teach on the driving range. Because there's been several times this year where I was on course with a player, and let's say we've been working on developing their full swing because that's all they tell me. It's their full swing. Where we've been on course for 3 holes and I'm looking going, this person might have one of the worst short games I've ever seen, but we never get there because he never explains that to me. Now, I don't tell him to his face he's got the worst short game that I've ever seen, but watching him or her play really highlights, wow, this player has no idea how to aim. Or if this player could just learn a little bit of course management, they could drastically lower their scores. And I've known this for a while, but this will literally be on my list every single year, I think, where you cannot play enough golf with your students to watch them in that environment, because their decision-making is very different, their thought process is very different, and a lot of times even their mental space is very different. Some people are way more relaxed on the driving range than they are on the golf course, or vice versa. So you have to play golf with your students. And if you're a golfer listening to this, if your coach isn't watching you play, you have to wonder, it would be so beneficial for your coach to watch you play and for you to watch your coach play as well, to learn from each other there. And if you've been working with a coach for several years and that coach has never seen you play, or you've never played a hole with them, you've really got to wonder what else is there to learn from that coach once you get on the golf course. And the answer is there's an endless amount of things you can learn by spending time on the golf course with your instructor. So that was number 4. You have to play golf with your students. And if you're a student, you've got to spend time on course with your coach and they've got to watch you compete. Number 5, this is a general thing. This is for everybody. You cannot take care of your body enough. Particular to golf, it's like if your body's not feeling the best, or if your body's not optimal, or if you're injured, or different things like that, all that's going to do is negatively affect your ability to play golf. And there's so many different components to that. There's the way we sleep. There's the way that there's us working out. There's us seeing a fitness professional. There's us seeing a medical professional. There's what we eat. There's all those different things. And I know for some of you, you might hear that and that might sound very overwhelming, but if you don't really look after any part of your body or any part of your performance, I need you to pick one or two and really start to consider how those effects can help you play better golf. And some of the specific examples is, especially on when you're on the golf course, are you warming up beforehand? I hope the answer is yes, but you have to get your body warmed up, physically warmed up, before you go on the golf course. Gives you the best chance to perform, gives you the best chance of not getting hurt. You've also got to look at your hydration and your nutrition. What you eat on the golf course, what you eat before you get to the golf course, and what you consume when you're on the golf course. The ability to keep your energy levels high has a lot to do with your nutrition and your hydration on the golf course. So there's your physical warm-up. There's what you consume before and after the golf course and during while you're on the golf course. There's your sleep. There is the way you take care of your body. And I guess a couple of specific examples for me, I've always been fairly diligent with warming up. And I've been a little bit better with nutrition in terms of what I consume on the golf course and what I consume morning of. But some things that I've continued to get better at, this is the first year that I more consistently saw my chiropractor to make sure that my body is in the best shape it can be. And this was also the year that I started spending a lot more time doing cold showers and just experimenting with some of that, I guess you call recovery type stuff. And I can say this year, being 37 years old, which I know is not old, depending who you ask, I spent more time feeling my best on the golf course than any other year. And I believe because I was taking better care of my body, I spent less time sore, I spent less time complaining about my back and different things like that. And I look back at all the years that I had those issues, and that was just because I was neglecting the things I did before I got to the golf course. And so that was another reminder that I just want to share with all of you. You can never take good enough care of your body. So what are the couple of things that you maybe do really poorly or that you don't do very well that you can start to change to make a very positive impact going into next year? The last thing I'll say is, and I said something, I learned something about a major champion this year. I was very fortunate with my affiliation with Super Speed Golf to spend a day with Padraig Harrington. Padraig Harrington, 3-time major champion. And I know that this is kind of funny coming back on the fact of you can't take care of your body enough. One of the things I learned in 2024 is Padraig Harrington loves Diet Coke. And we spent a day with him at a golf course down in Texas shooting some content, and it was actually fascinating how much Diet Coke he consumed, and we had a pretty good laugh, but nothing made him happier than an ice-cold Diet Coke. And I definitely did not see that one coming from a player who's got 185 ball speed and an incredible ability to generate speed as he gets older. He's now 52 years old. But I thought that was something that was really interesting that I did not expect. So some of the key things I've learned or that I've been reminded of in 2024. Never assume someone understands what you're saying. Explore what you can learn from other sports. Trying new things is rarely a bad idea. You have to spend time on the golf course with your students. You cannot take good enough care of your body. And Padraig Harrington loves Diet Cokes. I've been blessed and fortunate to do a lot of cool things in 2023. I think I said 2024 again just a moment ago. I've been so fortunate to do a lot of really cool things in 2023. And these were some of the key things that stuck out in my mind. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and maybe for you, as we kind of round down this part of the year, a chance for you to look back. What did you learn this year, and what are you going to do with that information? It might be professionally, it might be personally, it might be about your golf game. And I know so many people are shifting their mindset, what they want to do differently in 2024. But I think before we can do that, let's look back, because I know all of us have learned so many things this year, maybe some positive things, maybe some negative things. But we've all learned some really, really good things this year and some fantastic learning opportunities for all of us. Let's look back on those and use that to what's going to help us shape our 2024. This has been episode 25 of the Golf Never Sleeps podcast. Hope you have a fantastic day. Happy golfing.